Right, 3, 2, 1, jump!
And that right there is the face of somebody who just faced his own mortality. Someone who had traveled the world for 20 years and had never taken any of it in. This is the face of a man who, after 32 days trekking across southern Africa, realized for the first time in many years who he really is. He's just a man on a journey, and that every place he visits becomes a part of him. And so much of who he is where he's been.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I have an amazing guest, and I'm so thankful that he's got the time for us today. Thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us, hailing all the way from Cape Town, although it's sunny there at the moment, right? You aren't experiencing any rain.
Yeah, we've got sunshine this morning, yeah.
That's good. We've also got some sunshine in Johannesburg, so sunshine all around. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I know you've got a very busy schedule, being a director and all, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to meet with me today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to this.
Cool. So obviously you've interviewed me before, so now the roles are reversed. Okay, so make sure you answer properly. Look me in the eye.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So you obviously did the 32-day Cape Town to Victoria Falls tour camping. You was full on in there with the adventure. If you could describe the tour in 3 words, what words would you use and why?
3 words. The first thing that comes up is magical. I think it was a magic I didn't expect. I've traveled Africa extensively, and I didn't expect it to be that magical. So definitely magical. Humbling was the other one, definitely. We'll get into why later, but it was humbling, and it was, I think, enjoyable is probably the third one. It was just so much fun, and I enjoyed every single day of those 32 days. It sounds long. I mean, 32 days is over a month, but it was an enjoyable 32 days, every single one of them. So yeah, magical, enjoyable, and humbling.
I mean, those are really good 3 words to use, but I'm sure there's some parts of you that were like, this is very tiring. Did you ever get to that point in tour where you're like, whoa, I can't do this?
Yeah, definitely. But, the thing about being in a group is everybody's tired for the same reasons, so you kind of experience the fatigue as a group, which makes it a lot easier. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of adventure and a lot of long walks, and the heat is also something else, so all of that tires you out. But I don't know, the excitement for the next day just gives you the energy to keep going. So yeah, a little bit tiring, but I don't remember that part.
That's a good thing. Only share the good things. I mean, that's the reality of it. And I'm sure you had your own expectations, because you've obviously traveled a lot for work, in terms of you've gone to all of these countries and you've documented all of these people, you've done music videos and whatnot. But you weren't going, I wouldn't call it leisure, but you weren't going to seek adventure. You're obviously going for work. So I'm sure you had your own expectations of the tour before you actually started it. And how did those expectations compare to what you had actually experienced?
Yeah, I think I'm going to disagree with you and say that it did feel like leisure. It was,
okay.
compared to my normal traveling is always super rushed. Everything's last minute. You're sitting on the plane, figuring things out and planning things, landing in a place that you don't know, and sort of a small group of maybe 3 people. Often I'm even traveling alone, so my work is generally humanitarian stuff and human interest stories and that kind of stuff. So I'm traveling into very difficult places and telling very painful stories a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And my expectation for this wasn't that at all. I knew that this was going to be a lot more fun than that. I didn't realize how much fun. I thought it was going to feel like work, but everybody's got their cameras out. I just have a bigger one. So I felt like I was a tourist, and I felt like I was part of the people experiencing all of this stuff together. I just had a job to do during the day, but everybody on the trip was filming and photographing and doing what I was doing anyway. So it just felt like a big fun shoot with a whole big crew.
It felt more. It felt bigger. It felt like you were doing a movie this time.
Yeah, in some ways. And I mean, it's also like just the excitement when there's a lion. Everybody's trying to get the shot. Where normally in my work, I'm the only one with the camera, so I'm trying to get the shot. Where now it's in the truck or the bus, and everybody's trying to get that shot of the lion, which is fun. But yeah.
Did you find that people were respectable, at least, like when you were trying to get your shot, or even when you were in the way of somebody else? Did you give enough space for somebody to grab their shot? Because I find that very difficult when you're in a truck that's full. Luckily, like on my tour, we had enough space that each person could have 2 seats. So my tour was that full. So you probably would have had some really good window seats if you had actually gone on tour when you're supposed to. But like, do you find it difficult when you're with so many people to try and get the shots that you wanted? Are there any shots that you wanted to get that you couldn't get?
I mean, not really. Like my purpose of going on the trip was to capture the experience. And part of that experience is the other travelers photographing things and seeing things and getting excited. So when it did get too full, there'd be a lion and everybody would be on the one side of the truck out the windows. And if I couldn't get my shot, that's when I filmed them getting their shots. Yeah, and that still counted for me. So, yeah. But no, it was, I think everyone was really accommodating, as they are with everybody and everything that they're dealing with. And I think people knew I had a job to do there, so they definitely gave me space. But it was, I would also give them space. Once I got my shot, I'd move out the way and let everybody else go for it.
Yeah. Did you ever stop to just take in the moment and put the camera down and be like, wow?
Yeah. I mean, there's parts where I was going to start by saying in Namibia, there were times where I just, like everybody, when you're in those deserts, I would just stop and just take it all in. But there's a disconnect when you're using a camera. You're looking at this little screen, and in my mind, it's all these settings and light and all this stuff going on in my mind. But once I got my shot and look away from the camera, suddenly you're like, oh, it's an elephant right here. And so there's a different feeling. So, luckily we were spoiled with the deserts, but also with the animals enough that I would be able to get what I was looking for and still have time to experience it without that disconnect of having a camera between us.
Okay, that's good. I mean, at least you managed to put the camera aside and be like, I'm going to take this all in for me. And I think that's something that we tend to forget about when we're traveling. I know that I'm guilty of it myself. Like sometimes I'm so focused on getting the perfect Insta-worthy shot or something like that, then I don't actually take in the moment. When I went on my tour now to see the gorillas, I barely took any pictures. I'm pretty sure my managers are not impressed with me. They were like, we sent you on this tour and you took 0 pictures. I didn't even get to take a picture of myself or the gorilla, in all honesty. But there was this moment during my trek where I was like, I was this tiny little person in the middle of the forest, and there's this massive silverback in front of me, and I was like, I was stunned. I was too stunned to move. I was too stunned to pick up my phone, to take out my camera, or grab the GoPro and get like a nice wide shot. I was fully in the moment, and I think that that's something that we all need to actually focus on. It's sort of like a mind shift that you need to do when you're traveling.
But I see people at like big concerts, they're watching their favorite musician. That's
the phone is up in the air.
Yeah, they're holding their phone up and they're looking at the phone, and I'm like, you're missing everything here. Which means that I also, when I'm doing things in my own time, my phone is never out because I feel that disconnect immediately. So yeah, it does put a barrier between you and things. So the fact that you didn't get photographs of you and the gorillas means that you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've got the mental picture, guys. I've got the mental picture. As a director, how did you balance the experience of being a participant in the tour with also the desire to capture what, as you said, you had a job to do? So how did you balance the two?
I think it was easy. Most of the time when I'm traveling, I've got to be filming all the time. And often from a behind the scenes point of view, I'm never actually part of the thing that I'm filming. Where with this, I felt like I was a part of the thing. I'm also a tourist on the track with everybody. And it was, I don't often feel that in my work. I'm often the outsider. I look different to everybody, and I'm in a new place, and yeah, like I'm kind of behind the scenes with everything. Where with this trip, it felt like I was a part of it, and everybody on the trip just accepted me as another traveler, but I had a job to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it was the nicest shoot I've ever done. Because I got to experience so much stuff. And, a day is long, and the amount of activities that you do in a day there's so much stuff. So, just capturing, you get to a place, I'll spend 15-20 minutes filming, but then we're still there for another hour and a half. And then I would get to experience those things as well. So, yeah, it felt like I was a part of it and filming from the inside rather than being an outsider looking in.
I like that. It almost seems like, has it changed your perspective now in the way you film? Like, has this journey changed your approach to filmmaking and storytelling in general?
I don't know. That's a good question, but I actually don't know if it's changed. I think it's changed what I want to be filming. I spend a lot of time filming very painful stuff and things that when you get back from the trip, it takes you a couple weeks just to reorientate yourself and that kind of thing. So I want to be able to do more fun stuff now, and since then I've done some really interesting projects that I think even just my work that I did for the 32-day trip, other clients have seen that and been like, let's try do something like this, or, so I think it's changed what I want to be working on quite a bit. But I don't think it changed how I work.
Good. That's good. I mean, you still got the same sort of, vibe going on, keeping your work the same. And obviously this is what you love. How long have you been a director?
Well, directing, I've been making videos since I was 14, and that's like in the 90s, when we used to use VHS tapes and VCRs to edit and all of that. But I think professionally I've been doing it for 18 years. And, a shoot is, I do documentary. So documentary is capturing an environment, capturing how people interact with that environment, capturing their experiences and how they experience that environment, which is very much what I had to do on this trip. It's just that the environment changed every hour, so you get to experience and film all of that. Like suddenly we are on a dune in the desert, next thing we're in a canyon, then we're swimming somewhere,
the beach.
Yeah, so the variety in a single day was a lot more than I'm used to on a normal shoot.
Wow. I mean, I definitely agree with you about the vastness and the different scenery that you are going to experience on this type of tour, because there were some moments where I'd fallen asleep in the truck and we were like probably in like a town or something. And then when I opened my eyes, I'm like in this lush green area. And I'm like, did we change locations completely? And it's super, super crazy how that happens. And you don't actually notice the time go by unless you're actually not enjoying yourself in the truck and spending time in the truck and, conversating with people and stuff like that. You're not actually going to notice it sometimes. Like there were lots of times where I didn't notice that we moved from one region to another. And then they would tell you, obviously, because the driver and the guide will be like, okay, guys, making a stop in this port or something like that. And you're like, when did we leave Kampala?
But that also speaks to how comfortable those seats are. Like there's I mean, being able to sleep in a truck going over gravel roads and all of that. Yeah, it's super comfortable at least.
Of me thinks I might have narcolepsy because I think I just can sleep anywhere. I think I'm the problem. That's why I probably didn't worry about sleeping in the tent, because I was like, I'm gonna be so tired and I just know that I am gonna pass out anyway. I'm not gonna care about the bugs. I'll be fine. Speaking of documentaries, you've obviously filmed your entire journey and then obviously shared that with us. Thank you so much again for that wonderful work that you've done. And I must say your dialogue in the actual documentary is fantastic. You speak so well, and the way that you describe everything is amazing. And there's a couple of lines and things that you've said that I'd like us to go through. So one of the things that really stand out for me is you said, they say if you travel far enough, you meet yourself. Take me through that and what that actually means.
Yeah, I think, when you move away from everything that you might be going to the other side of the world. You might be going to a neighboring country or any of that. But the thing is that where we live and the way that we are comfortable in our environment, when you move away from where you stay, your environment changes and it does force you to look at yourself. I remember being in Russia once and just realizing how different everything, so that was the furthest I've ever been from home. And it does make you look at yourself, because just normal things that we take for granted, that we think this is just how it is, when you travel, those things can be completely different. Like in Russia, when you buy something at the shop, you never hand money to somebody. They have these little plates at the till that you put the money in.
Wow.
And I mean, it's such a simple thing, but it makes you think, like, what, for me, it's just so normal handing somebody cash, but now there's this different way of doing it. And, that's the same as traveling in Africa, is what you might accept as just normal ways of doing things. Suddenly you're seeing people living in grass houses that they've made out of glass, or you're seeing people living in the desert, or you're seeing, I remember the one guide, a Bushman guide, that was explaining, he was actually just telling us how the dunes work, but the different sounds that he was making with his mouth was incredible, and just realizing, like, this man comes from centuries of living a completely different way to the way that I live. And yeah, I think that definitely shifts how you see yourself and your environment, because you're seeing other people experiencing their environments in such a different way than you used to.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. I know, like, there were so many different things that just made me feel obviously humbled. We've obviously spoken about feeling humbled by these journeys. And I would see so many happy children running around everywhere we went with so little. And I was like, how are you this happy with so little? Whereas I have a home, I have running water, I have electricity, etc. Okay, fine, load shedding, it happens. But we have all of these things that we should be grateful for. And here are these other people who are living in these vast areas, these vast regions with very little. And it really, really takes you back to a point of being so humbled, and really shows you takes you out of your comfort zone a little bit. Going back to being humbled, you obviously mentioned that, tour was very humbling, and you've said things like, in the documentary, you've said things like how small you felt compared to, Vic Falls, etc. Take me through that and the different experiences of like you being in a mokoro and the elephants being right in front of you and your bungee jumping, etc.
Yeah, like I think when it comes to the environments that I live in, and that I think most people in the Western world live in, these environments where we stay in our houses and we leave and we know exactly what's going to happen. We know if the robots screen, people are going to be moving, so we have all of these safety nets, but everything is like, it feels like this, it doesn't feel like that normally, but once you've stood in the middle,
once you go out there, you feel almost like you're closed off.
Like standing in the Namib Desert and there's nothing close to you. Everything is on the horizon, 360 around you, and like it's so different from the way that we live in the world that we live in. It humbles you like that, and you do feel super small. I mean, jumping off that canyon in Vic Falls, that was something else. I didn't want to do it. But it's one of those things, you pay for it and then you're like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And jumping off there, it was, that was something else completely.
I love how you said, I faced my own mortality when you did it. And I was like, I don't think anybody can actually understand that line up until you do it yourself.
And it's, you also in Zimbabwe, like these cables don't look so safe, but I'm watching the other people going and it all seems fine. But suddenly I jump off a cliff and the cliff is just racing past you. And next thing you're just swinging and dangling above this canyon. There's hippos and crocodiles below you. And like you feel tiny at that moment.
Like inches away from possible death.
It feels like it, I think it was safe though. But
you're here today, so that means you're okay. And you also mentioned how profound that experience was. Did you think that you were going to get such a profound experience just from a mere bungee jump?
I don't know. I was just thinking about how scary it was going to be. But I think doing that after this trip, after spending 32 days experiencing new things, and I think having quite a mind shift, of my own perception of things, and being so busy, I didn't really have time to stop and think like what an impact the tour had made on me, and how my mindset had shifted so much. But I think in that moment, not saying my life flashed before my eyes, but I think the tour flashed before my eyes, and jumping off there and it's a reality check. And suddenly I was, it felt like I faced my own mortality. It was just like, it felt like I was just falling off a cliff, and then suddenly I'm not falling off a cliff anymore. So it was a lot to take in those few seconds. I mean, it takes 3 seconds to get to the bottom, so
it's definitely very quick. Hey, like you don't think the drop probably feels like it took forever.
Yeah, and like you're so close to the edge of the cliff that you're just seeing rocks flying past you and the water getting closer. And that's something else.
Oh my gosh. It definitely, I don't know if you've encouraged me to do one. You're definitely not encouraging any faith here.
No, but it is very cool. Like it's something I've never bungee jumped before. I've done some extreme things with airplanes and that kind of stuff, but actually jumping off a cliff on the edge of a rope in Zimbabwe, I will not forget that easily. That's definitely one of the highlights of traveling always for me.
Yeah. Speaking of highlights and things that you wouldn't forget, is there anything from your tour that really resonates with you and stands out with you that you still remember every little detail up until now?
So much of it. So much of it. I think for me, my favorite part was staying in Botswana, where we were in the Kwai Reserve. And you're hearing at night, you're in a tent, you're not allowed to leave the tent. There's like a bathroom section outside your tent that's cordoned off, but you aren't allowed to leave because you are amongst wild animals.
Yeah,
And
you're one with the wild.
And hearing the lions early in the morning, and then getting out of our tents, jumping into the safari vehicle and driving 10, 15 meters, and there's a whole family of lions with cubs playing and everything right there. And then you look that side and there's an elephant walking past, and then there's a hippo over there. And that for me stood out so much. And I won't forget that easily. Like just being so close to elephants. I've been close to elephants before, and I've fed them, but those elephants in the ways that I'd seen them before was always in some form of a park where the elephants are almost a bit
habituated.
Yeah, but when you see them out just in the wild like that, just knocking a tree over, and knowing this thing can charge us and knock this vehicle over, and just it makes you feel vulnerable, but it's also you really feel immersed in their environment. Where I think my other experiences with especially elephants have always been like the elephants are in our environment, where being out in that part of Botswana was, it was something else.
I love that. And, Andrew, our CEO, always says that, going on an overland tour allows you to step outside your life, invest in yourself. It's almost like a journey of self-discovery. Did you find that this tour was also the same for you? Was it a journey of self-discovery, being that you've seen so much already?
Yeah, I think I was seeing things differently with new eyes. And that always makes you look at yourself, and I think also you're not experiencing it on your own. You're experiencing it with people of different ages from different parts of the world. And being a local African, I was having to explain a lot of stuff to the other tourists. But I think I've forgotten your question.
Do you think that overlanding is a journey of self-discovery?
Yeah. Okay, back on topic. I think it is, because you no longer in the hustle and bustle of the city, and for me, just airports and traveling and moving fast and always being in a rush and all of that, like, being in an environment where, I don't know, you just feel vulnerable and open and kind of part of nature. I think that's a big thing as well, is that you feel like you're part of the nature around you. And that for me was so different that it definitely, it definitely makes you look at yourself.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I mean, I've shared with you recently how going on my tour has changed me completely. I'm like a completely different person. My family now calls me Mishka the Buddha, because that's what I am. I'm very wise now. And you've obviously mentioned in the documentary that you've quoted one of my favorite authors, J.R. Tolkien, that not all those who wander are lost, but you felt lost. Like, what made you even, add that into the documentary? What was your thought process behind that?
Well, I think that was referring to my work before going on to this trip. It was 15 years of just a blur of airports, and I don't want to say like poverty and pain, but it was that, making documentaries, especially the humanitarian documentaries. It's disorientating doing that for such a long time, and it doesn't ground you at all when you're doing that kind of stuff. You're sleeping in a 5-star hotel, but then spending every day in like extreme poverty. And so that's very much what my life was like before I went on this trip. And I think to a degree I did feel lost, but going on this trip, I didn't. I felt like I was part of something. I felt like I was exploring something that I was supposed to explore. And there wasn't all of that pain and suffering that I was used to. So, yeah, it was, I think, using that quote, not all that who wander are lost. It was, we're wandering now, but I didn't feel lost anymore.
Also helped that you weren't alone.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I've flown into countries recently in December. I flew into Central African Republic, and that was on my own, landing in a country where nobody speaks English and nobody really wants you to be coming into the country because it's an active war zone. So, doing that kind of stuff is normal for me, but being able to experience something as a group. Actually, when I landed in Central African Republic, my first thought was, I wish Dr. T was here. And Dr. T was our guide on my trip that I went on with African Overland tour. So the reason I say that is because when we got to border crossings, the tour guides would hand out these little papers and you'd have to fill them out. And it was like this smooth process getting into countries. But when you're completely on your own, you don't even have a pen. Like, somebody gives you a piece of paper, it's all in French. And I felt so, I just felt like, what am I doing? How am I going to get through customs? Like, what are the rules here? And what is the etiquette? And, how do you, but on the Overland tour, you don't have to worry about any of that. There's somebody helping you through it. So, I definitely missed him on my last trip.
Every step of the way, though, like on an Overland tour, they're there for you. Like when you're going for your activities, your guide will go and he'll like sign you up for your activities and things like that. Grab your passports if needed, your yellow fever and whatnot. And it just makes life so much easier. Like, you don't think how much a difference those people can make on your tour, as opposed to, trying and doing it by yourself. Because I can only imagine how difficult that would be. I mean, and you, for somebody who's an experienced traveler, traveling with all of your equipment, and now you're thinking, how am I getting into this country? Am I going to be fine? Do I need to get on the plane and go back home?
Yeah. So that, I missed that a lot. In trips since then, like, I've just been like, that was so much easier than doing this on my own.
For anybody who is also someone who does documentaries like what you usually do, humanitarian documentaries and things like that, would you advise them to branch out a little bit and start doing things like this, start doing documentaries about tours? And not that we're gonna hire them, we're sticking with you. Just, anybody who's thinking that, this humanitarian stuff is becoming a bit heavy, what's a way that I can branch out and make the things that I do more impactful?
Yeah, like, I think filming wildlife is a privilege for anybody in my industry. The guys that do it full-time professionally are some of the best in the world. If you watch any of David Attenborough's films, like, it's some of the best videography you've ever seen. So yeah, for people that generally film the type, documentaries about people and human interest stuff and humanitarian stuff, it's such a break to be able to film nature and animals and these vast landscapes. And it's definitely a nice break. And to be able to do it full time, I think, is probably the goal of many people who do what I do, is to be able, in Africa, to be able to film wildlife and the landscapes. Yeah, that's beautiful. I wish I could do it full time.
I mean, if you manifest it, it will come. It will come. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And, obviously, it's not just about the wildlife. It's about the amount of culture that you're seeing. You got to do Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. What was it like seeing all of the different cultures that was in those different countries?
It was very interesting. I mean, the Himba tribe in Namibia, the woman put some kind of clay in their hair. I don't know if it's, I'm not sure exactly what it is. And that for me was fascinating. Like I really wanted to know why. I didn't get my answer, but it was, it's just interesting to see how different people and sort of their understanding of what is good and what is nice and what is how, in Botswana, we mostly just experienced the animals, but it was, the guides is often your sort of key to understanding the locals. And, I had extensive conversations with the guides. They're always awesome, so like the local guides is where I learned so much about the local cultures and that kind of thing. And like we were saying earlier, it's when you see how people live differently and, their different experiences and different ways of interacting with their environment. Yeah, it was mind-blowing sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine. And just going back on the guides, and the impact on your tour, it really makes or breaks your tour. Hey, like the way that they do things, the interactions that you have with them. I mean, I stayed up because obviously I took over your tour and I was traveling over Christmas and New Year. Thank you, Jeff. I stayed up with my guide up until like 3-4 o'clock in the morning, talking on New Year's Eve, into New Year's Day, and they have so much of knowledge and so much wealth of knowledge that they just want to share and they want people to experience. And it sits with you forever. Like, I will never forget the talks that I've had with my guide, and I'm sure you'll never forget the talks that you've had.
Definitely.
I love that. And it really is such a wonderful, it's almost like a bond that you get to create with them, and you bond with each person on your tour. That's one of the best things that I found about tours, because I'm really bad at making friends. And I made friends with almost everybody on my tour. I mean, everybody. Yeah, not almost everybody on my tour. And we still chat now. Is there still people that you chat with from your tour?
Yeah, definitely. I actually have a friend now who lives in Switzerland. And after the tour, he came and stayed with me for 2 weeks in my house.
Wow.
Because he wanted to experience my life and what I do. And he was just like, I'm going to just tag along with what you do in your daily life. And we've become quite good friends. And when I do eventually get to Switzerland, I've got a friend there that I can stay with. And, but I got to know everybody. Also, I was interviewing them and filming them. So, there's a rapport that you build with people as well. But yeah, we had a group of 9. They were probably in their 50s from Iceland. And when am I ever going to spend 2 weeks with people from Iceland, And
exactly.
It was mind blowing. And also so funny, whenever we got to any kind of off-road vehicle, all the Iceland guys would go and look at the tires, and I was just like, why are they doing that? And, after chatting to them, realizing that where they come from, the tires on your vehicle is the most important part of your life, So, the way that they've got to move through snow and mountains and everything. But yeah, it was like we had people from all over the place, South America, India, lots of European countries, and that crew from Iceland. And that was one of the coolest parts of the trip, was the people and making new friends. And we've got a WhatsApp group. I don't know how active it is now, because that was 2 years ago that I did that trip. But for a long time afterwards, everyone was sharing photos. And also, look, I'm at home. This is what my view from home looks like. And I always won because I live in Cape Town.
That is true. When I was prepping for the webinar and I was writing my intro, I was like, I am quite jealous of Jeff's view because he's in Cape Town.
Put it behind you.
This is our background. That's what the view looks like here, for reals.
That's where I live.
Exactly. You're very, very lucky. I mean, when we did our year-end function last year, where you joined us to do those group interviews, so when I had been to Cape Town first, a couple of years back, I was really young. I was like probably about 6-7 years old with my parents. I didn't get to experience it like for myself. I experienced what they experienced. So when I went back for the year end, I was like, I want to live here. I came back and I told my partner, I'm like, you need to find a way to move your job to Cape Town because that's where we need to go.
Yeah, and I think for people who haven't experienced Africa, it's a really nice start, because that's where that trip starts in Cape Town. So, I think some of the guys that I went on my tour with came like a week early and spent time in Cape Town, experiencing Cape Town before going on the trip. So I think for people who aren't from here, that's a cool way to start.
That is a good way to start, though. We always recommend it to clients, take a couple of days, if you're starting in Cape Town especially, to just take in the city. Because again, there's so much to do. It's not like something that you can do in one day. You need a couple of days to take it in. The food, the wine, the beaches, the penguins, the seals, all of it. Like you need some time to take it in. And I think that's what makes overlanding so special, is that you've got some time to take in the places that you visit. Like you spend a couple of days in Botswana, you spend a couple of days in Namibia, you spend a couple of days in Zimbabwe. You're seeing so much of it in a very short space of time, very often. And when I was speaking to Andrew yesterday about overland tours, and we were talking about what types of people should be on overland tours and things like that, and he was like, often people don't realize that the actual drive between the different regions is actually part of your highlight. Like getting from one border to the next, that's actually part of your highlight. It's something that you will often take for granted. And yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's the driving part is amazing, and luckily in these trucks you've got massive windows and you're higher up. So, the difference of that compared to a car already, you've got a much better view of the driving part, and you are driving through these changing landscapes. And I remember going into Namibia just before the Namibian border, suddenly it feels like you're on the moon. You've been driving in desert and now there's these massive black rock mountains all around you, and then you go through the border, you go over a river, and suddenly you're in the desert again. So you missed a lot sleeping on your tour.
I think I only slept for like the first 2 days, and then I made lots of friends. And there was this one guy on my tour who I actually interviewed in our last webinar, William. And there was one day on our tour where it was a long day of traveling. And he, when the seats are not full, you have to switch around in the truck so that you get a vibe from each side of the truck. So he decided to sit in the front and I was sitting in the back. But he was sitting alone, and all of the people in the front were all taking a nap. We stopped at a garage, and he woke up and he's like, I'm coming to sit next to you. Everybody in the front is sleeping. Nobody's talking to me. I've got nothing to do. And that's how our bond started. And it's bonds that I will hold on to forever. I mean, my group and I are still chatting. My boyfriend is actually going to Spain and Slovenia in a couple of weeks. And there's 2 ladies from my tour who are in Slovenia. And they were like, Mishka, when is your mooch coming to visit? We're going to take you for a drink. And I'm like, he's coming. Here's his number.
Yeah, that's cool. Those connections do definitely happen on these trips.
They stick with you. And that's one of my, I think it's now one of my favorite things about traveling in a group. One of the guys on our tour said, I mean, you may have gotten onto the plane by yourself and you may have got through customs by yourself, but as soon as you got into this truck, you were never alone. You're never going to be alone. And that's the best thing about it. For anybody who feels like it's too scary to do or it's too scary to experience, do you have any advice for that? Somebody who's too scared to do something like this?
Yeah, I think I would be too scared to do that trip on my own. Like to hire a car and just to try and do those same things on my own, or with a couple friends in a car, it would be so much more stressful. So doing it as a group, that it definitely makes you feel a lot safer. There was one moment where we were tracking a cheetah because we hadn't seen a cheetah yet, and there was a cheetah sitting under, I'm lying, it was a leopard. We were tracking a leopard, and there was a leopard lying under this tree. So, the safari 4x4s got close to it. And we were right there, and we were taking photos and everything. And when we reversed out, the back wheel popped. And suddenly we've got a flat tire and a leopard in the same space. And I think if I was on my own, that would have been extremely scary, having to change a tire with a leopard right there. But because we were in a big group and we were with experienced guides that knew how to handle the situation, they fixed that tire super quick. They had all the right equipment. I mean, you're in soft sand. So it's not a case of just pulling out your little jack and jacking the car up. It was, they had all the right tools and they had all of that. So, yeah, definitely being in a group and doing it with experienced guides like that just makes it so much easier. I don't think I'd do that trip on my own.
Yeah. And the thing is, with these tours, I feel like they think of everything that could go possibly wrong and they are prepared for it. Because obviously, these trucks, they go through a lot. They're covering massive destinations. They're carrying a bunch of travelers with their luggage. Plus, they're carrying all of the food, all of the equipment to cook. It's a fully purpose-led truck, right? And some of the days on the road can be long. And this is Africa. It is hot out here. So when we were in Uganda, we were going up a really steep hill. It was on our way to Lake Banyoni. And we were going up a really steep hill, and the truck was just like, I'm not doing this. The truck said no. So we were stopped on the side of the road. Here's Dingy and Rishi, that was my guide and driver. They pick up the front of the truck. That was so cool to see also. And they're busy fixing the truck. And here we are just sitting on the side of the road eating mangoes while they're busy fixing the truck. But it was nice to see that the other guys on the truck, I mean, other passengers on the truck, they also joined in. There was one guy who knows nothing about trucks or cars, and he was just standing there holding a spanner. So, it's a participation tour. We participate.
Yeah.
And speaking of the participation, what did you actually feel about it? Like participating in helping with making the food and putting up your tent. Did you get to a point where you got so good at putting up your tent that you helped other people put up their tent?
Yeah, I mean, putting up tents felt like a group effort. Most of the people were 2 people in the tent, so they would do it together. So I would be struggling on my own. So it was normally them helping me, because putting up a tent on your own is difficult. But yeah, I think everything that you're doing together as a group, you're helping with all kinds of things, helping with the food prep, helping with people setting up tents, helping hold a spanner, like you said now, so that it's just part of that group experience that is so much better. I liked it. Yeah.
You liked it. That's good. And you obviously also spoke about, you've seen many giraffes, but when you saw the giraffe with the other people who were seeing a giraffe for the first time, it was like almost awe-inspiring. What were some of the best reactions that you got from other people when they saw the wildlife? Is there anyone that sticks out to you?
Yeah, we didn't see a lot of wildlife at the beginning of the first few days of the trip, because we were traveling from Cape Town up to Namibia. So at that point, it was mostly landscapes. But when we got into Botswana, I think the first sort of animal sighting we had was a warthog mother running with like 5 little warthogs behind her. I've seen this 1,000 times, but you just see people losing their minds like they've never seen, and the Lion King references, because that's where a lot of people, their experience of African wildlife is through Lion King, so everything got named the same, and they were seeing all of those animals. And that for me, I'm used to seeing a zebra. It's, a zebra's a zebra, but suddenly you're seeing someone getting so excited about seeing their first zebra that you can't help not also being excited about it. So I think that was that line about the giraffe, and it was specifically a giraffe where for me it's just a giraffe. But for other people, it's the weirdest animal they've ever seen. I saw a picture the other day that said, a little meme that said, "How are unicorns not real, but giraffes are?"
I've always wondered that myself, because have you seen when a giraffe drinks water, what they look like when they're drinking water?
Yeah, it's wild.
It's the weirdest thing ever. And how are their legs doing that? I really hope nobody in this webinar can hear my dog barking. Anyway, side note. You also mentioned that every place that you visit becomes a part of you. You've obviously mentioned many times you've seen lots of disaster, lots of pain, etc. I'm sure that this has brought a really different experience to all of the things that you've already seen. And how has that changed your perspective of everything that you do now?
Well, it is true. When you visit a place, it does become a part of you because you experience it and you learn about it and you learn about yourself and all of that. And I think the sort of theme of that documentary I made was I had so many parts of me that had come from very painful places where now I could add a new part of me. So being in these beautiful places and experiencing all of that, it just added some joy into the parts of me that have been to all these different places. So, yeah, it was, yeah.
You know what I'm picturing? I don't know if you watched it, but have you watched Inside Out? It's an animated film. Okay, you need to watch it. You might have a good cry afterwards. But in Inside Out, it's basically based on the emotions that you have in your brain. I honestly don't think that movie was made for kids. That thing was made for adults. Okay. And now that you're talking about all of these experiences that you've had and whatnot, there's one emotion called joy, which you generally start off with. But I feel like in your head, it was all of the other stuff. And now I'm just seeing the ball of joy just roll into your mind after you've been on this tour. Is that what it feels like?
Yeah. And, when I was in Chad recently, and, it's also long distances between things. And sorry, I think that having experienced the Overland tour, it kind of felt like I was doing that again when I was in Chad, and I'm sort of taking in the environment in a different way. So it's almost like this tour gave me a new gear of perception, and instead of just looking at this country, Chad, for the refugee camps that I was visiting, and not just stuck in that mindset, also being like appreciating the beauty around me, traveling to these different parts of that country. So yeah, it definitely gave me a new gear of appreciation for, because I am an explorer, and instead of getting caught up in the difficult, painful parts of traveling to new places, I could also find beauty within that. And I think that comes from this trip. I'm sure of it.
Aw, we love doing that to people. Well, I think that we've come to the end, and thank you again so much for your time. I have one final question. What's one lasting image or memory that you'll carry with you from this tour?
Yo, how can you ask about one? There's so many. Yeah, I think
choosing your favorite child.
Yeah, it's got to be the Namib Desert. I think for me, it's, it was the first time ever. I've been in so many different deserts, but the Namib Desert, it just feels magical, and it feels ancient, and it feels like you've landed on another planet. And the sunsets and the moon rising, and that definitely left a lasting impression on me. I want to go back to Namibia sometime and just explore it again.
Of course, hit us up. We'll hook you up. But again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everybody who's joined our webinar today. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Jeff, again, I love chatting to you. We should do this again. And I look forward to working with you in the future. And, inspiring more people. Thank you again for joining us today, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, awesome. This was fun. Thanks so much.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Bye.